You're with us here on Rising Stars on Bloomberg TV India. Building a great company goes beyond the products or offerings. One needs to cultivate the passion to do something different and in the best way possible. And Growth Enabler enables you to do just that. Joining me today is Rajeev Banduni, CEO of Growth Enabler, to talk us through the business model. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Rajeev. Just for the sake of our viewers, can you give us a brief sense of how really your business model works? You do work, with startups. Give us a sense, really, of the kind of work you do with them.
Absolutely. So let me just put together the opportunity that exists for especially a country like India, because that's where we have our initial focus is, although we are a global company based out of London. So I'm going to just contextualize what we have been observing and why we are so excited about what's happening, especially in India. When we look at some of the numbers, there are 62% of our current population is a working age population. Actually, that's huge, and the 50% of population is below the age of 25. If I just fast forward, by 2020, while the world will be getting older, Indian population, the average age will be around 29. Actually, that gives an immense opportunity for what can happen in India. Actually, when I look at startup or micro SMEs, I think that's where there is the biggest opportunity for us in India, because when you look at country like Singapore, Taiwan, the micro SMEs contribute more than 70% to their employment, actually, and around 50 to 85% to their GDP. But in India, it's just 17% to our GDP. So the need of the hour is to ensure that there are more startups coming up in India, and the other need is to ensure that they are successful. If you look at Harvard Business Review report, actually globally, 85% of the startups fail in first 18 months, actually. So what is it we need to do to ensure that more and more startup is being successful, actually? So that's the opportunity that exists, and that's what we are trying to solve. So
okay.
What Growth Enabler does? Growth Enabler is democratizing access to world-leading advice for those who seek it most.
Okay.
And we're trying to ensure that it's available to them anytime, anywhere, because they can access it anywhere, whether they are in Himachal Pradesh, whether they are in Delhi, whether they are in Dehradun, to ensure that this world-leading advice gets to them. Whatever idea they have,
sure.
They have an opportunity to get access these tools, templates, and access to the global leaders who can give them guidance how to make a startup successful.
Okay. You're talking about SMEs and micro SMEs, Rajeev. Give us a sense of, what areas you largely see a lot of the startups. Is there a trend that you're seeing, just to get a sense of where a lot of your startups these days are coming up? Which areas?
So what's happening in India, if you look at specifically, there are a lot of food tech startup is coming, because first it's easy to set up, then the delivery and the consolidation. I think those are the things which is coming up. Then I also look at trends towards aggregating of services. So whether you aggregate home services, whether you aggregate gym services. I think when I look at GEM's report, right, and I think there is a reason why this is happening, actually. So GEM does a report globally on startup and how to monitor it, actually, and basically they focus on what a startup economy is. Either you are a factor-based startup, or you're an efficiency-based startup, or you are an innovation-based startup, actually. And primarily, India is currently more towards factor-based startup, actually, that there is something exists and you get into that and try and deliver a food or try and aggregate something and give it to them, actually. That's the trend, which is a good trend, actually, specifically for India, which is very innovative in terms of entrepreneurship, actually. But I think the next focus you're going to see is more towards efficiency and innovation-based startup, actually. That's what you have seen how Valley has evolved, actually.
Okay, so you are, of course, in the business of advising and mentoring startups. What are one or two of the key things that you'd really tell an entrepreneur or a startup to keep in mind? Because statistics show that nearly 70 to 80% of all startups don't really manage to hold it out more than, say, 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, you're right, and these are the statistics which is global. The statistics in India is a little different, actually. It's a bit on higher side. I think primarily what's happening, I mean, there are a couple of things we have observed, actually, because what we are seeing is that a lot of people get into startup because the current environment looks a bit romantic. I think my advice is that when you're getting into a startup, look for a specific problems, actually, and I think that's a bit lacking. And also look at the size of this problem. Is it a lifestyle size problem, or is the lifestyle kind of a business, or it's going to be a big business, actually? And then continue to learn and apply these, actually, because you would see that, I mean, we did a recent report on the layoff recently happened, actually, and I said, look, it's a good thing. It's a maturing of startup, actually, because you take a hypothesis, in our word we call it guess, try to test it, actually, figure it out. One thing is not working, whatever is learning is that you apply to that, actually, then pivot, actually. Our feedback or suggestion to startup is that if something is not working, we call it, something is failing, actually, fail fast, apply it and learn, and then put it together, actually. That's one thing. Hiring is another big thing we are looking at startup, actually, and I'm not surprised, primarily because our workforce currently is not trained to work in startups. Startup requires a high degree of uncertainty, anxiety, innovation, and to survive in that environment, your mindset has to be very different, actually. So I think there is a need of ours to ensure that at school level, at a college level, people are being sensitized towards, how can you pick up a problem, convert it into an opportunity, and build a startup, actually.
How about, gender diversity? Do you see enough of that when it comes to startups who are pitching to you, at least? For example, the Uber founder was in India recently. He was talking to students at IT Bombay. This is one of the questions that did come up, that do you see enough, women entrepreneurs who are making those pitches, who are chasing after those startups?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a huge, actually, we need to bridge that. I mean, I think that stems from a fact because, in workforce, we have gender diversity, actually. So I think what we need to do, in fact, if the recent survey which was conducted, actually, which was done by FICCI, and I was reading through that, actually, and what interestingly we found is that if we can balance this gender diversity and get more women, not only in workforce but also in entrepreneurship, it can positively impact our GDP by 2.5%, actually. So there is absolutely need to do that, actually. I know for sure. My wife is a home entrepreneur because I've got 2 kids, and she needs an environment which allows to be successful. And I think that's there at a lot of places, actually. What we need is to ensure that the environment, the infrastructure, and the support ecosystem allows more and more women workforce, women entrepreneur to come up, actually, because that is what is needed, actually. So I'm not surprised with these questions, and I know that like us, like you, it needs to be resolved, actually. And I think there are steps being taken towards to ensure that both from a government perspective and the larger ecosystems, whether giving extra subsidies to towards gender sensitization or special status, I think these are being done, actually. And I think slowly what we will look at is,
sure,
it's like creating poster child, right? So what happens is that 1 or 2 people are successful, then the rest of the people say, oh, if she can, then I can, actually, and then that follow-up happens. Yeah.
All right, Rajeev, thank you so much for joining us. It's a very quick chat, but that's essentially GrowthEnabler talking to us about their business model live from Bangalore. Completely out of time. On the other side, what did you miss? Just stay tuned.